So this is new, and this is mine. So good to see you, everyone. So this is the first official token engineering meetup. We actually hijacked one that was happening with Trent last week. But I'm Shabnam, and does anyone of you know about Bitcoin? Okay. And tokens in general? And token engineering? Good, good. Because that's something that just came up like a month ago or so, and it's mainly from Trent McConaughey, who's doing this Ocean protocol. They really had a hard time to think about a decentralized data marketplace which just works, which incentivizes people to share, to curate the data, and to do forecasts, upload it, and that cannot be gamed. So this is a nice thing, but the people that I brought into this community are from the real world, from the energy world. And we also think about programming incentives, and we can do that. And we can also tokenize, but we tokenize real things, like energy. And the funny thing is, so Bitcoin is classified as a virtual commodity, right? And at first I just ignored it because, what can we do with tokens and blockchain? But when I started thinking about tokenizing energy, this came back all the time. I'm like, okay, so what if we are really tokenizing commodity, if we're virtualizing commodity, and it is really backed by something like solar energy, for example? What could we do with that? How can we incentivize it? And actually that came back to me 2 years after I met Nick Gogerty from SolarCoin, and he was the first person who made me think about money, because I asked him, where is the value of SolarCoin comes from? And he asked me, where does the value of your money come from? And I was already 36 then, and it was actually very a moment that you remember, that you're like, what else am I not questioning that I should be questioning? So I'm not going to introduce any more, other than maybe just show you. When we say, what are we tokenizing? Okay, this is a house, it has a solar rooftop inside, it has storage, heating and cooling is maybe electrified, and people are using it. So this housing also has an energy monitoring system, just energy monitoring data or capturing data. So we know all about the energy flows inside the building. It's digitalized. So that thing earns solar coins, right? 1 megawatt hour, 1 solar coin. And now the solar coins are traded on global crypto exchanges, so people can price them and then tag a value to it. That's something interesting, and Nick is going to talk about. But we also have something called energy token. It's also being traded on crypto currency exchanges, and people get it for being energy efficient. So others who want these people to be energy efficient can use these tokens to incentivize. If you're from the energy world, we've been talking about demand response for a decade already and sending people price signals, and everyone's like, who's gonna care? Maybe they want a red, yellow, green light system to understand what energy efficiency means. And that, if you think about it, is really boring. You don't want to program a lighting system for. But thinking in cryptocurrencies that are being commoditized, that people can use it for actual paying, that people value, now that makes this whole programming energy efficiency really, really sexy again. And the other thing that is interesting is the energy data that we have, right? So we analyze energy data flow, and now we have the Ocean decentralized data exchange platform. So this building can actually earn income by monetizing the data, creating forecasts that are not just interesting for the grid operator, which we from the energy system always think about the energy system, the grid operator. Is he going to be happy about it? But that really creates value for other sectors as well, like real estate and so on. And then we can now program this, really create programmable ownership and programmable participation. You can fractionalize the value that is being tokenized there. And all of a sudden you start thinking, okay, how can we build a system that values clean energy, that values sustainable life, and also how can we use it in places where there's no such infrastructure at all. And Sam from the Sun Protocol is going to talk about that. If you bring this possibility to a place where there was no electricity, no internet, and you bring all of that there, tokenize, and you bring also the digital financial infrastructure there, that they can build up their own credit systems, which might probably not even be debt-based. So these are interesting things, and I'm just, I think, going to leave it there. Just tell you that we've been thinking about virtual goods for a long time already, or it's normal by now that people buy virtual goods with real money and value it. There's a whole economy behind it. It's called virtual economy. There have been market makers for years, and those market makers were the first one to get into Bitcoin because they knew you can't make money with virtual goods and virtual commodities. So, and when you think about what is virtual commodity like Bitcoin, you get a long text. If you really feel like it, you read it twice. And what happened was really, I was just staring for too long at it, and then I really saw, okay, there's some words I understand. And then all of a sudden this perspective shift came, and I just didn't see Bitcoin, that thing that I don't understand, that just is eating up energy resources and is probably a Ponzi scheme. All of a sudden I was like, who cares? That thing shows you can transfer value trustlessly across any globe. And now we know we can program value, and we can tokenize it, we can program incentives, and I can apply it to something that I know. And that's the perspective change I hope all of you are going to get at some point. And with that, I will just give it to you. Yeah, you can go ahead and start with the value network theory,
sure.
Right? Is it here?
Yeah, I'll plug in my machine and we'll go over. While I'm plugging in the machine, I'll explain who I am and what's going on here. I am, this evening, my name is Nick Gogerty, and I am your token, as you can tell by my suit, I'm the token evil American banker in the room. Ironically, I have this, I usually work in shorts on my couch and a t-shirt. Today I dressed up for the Solar Energy Fair, so that's why I have the suit on. I do have a background in finance, but I try not to be the evil banker, and I'll get into that briefly. Okay. The other bad news, or true news, is you're going to get 3 really quick presentations. One of them is a year old, and the other 2 are kind of half-baked. They're not fully ready. That being said, you should actually... Okay, now what happened? Okay. Now, the reason you should be actually excited about that is you're probably the first people to see some of this stuff. The people who will see some of this stuff afterwards, the final paper is going to be delivered at at MIT at a complexity forum on July 26th as a paper. This specific paper, I was asked by a senior member of the US Federal Reserve actually to submit this paper for research for a network conference, or a conference on crypto in the fall. We missed the deadline, but whatever. So you're going to see some very, very interesting things. Before I get into that, I will be going fairly quickly. This will be, real economics and some token stuff. A background on me and who I am. I did co-found SolarCoin 4 years ago. Before that, I have a fairly deep technical background and finance background. I started trading Japanese yen futures as a kid. 17, who's really bad at it, because 17-year-olds and leverage, a bad combination. Ran to university all excited to study economics, and quit after 6 weeks because I thought it was so poorly grounded and thought out. I'm like, this is a really weak science. Economics wants to be physics, but it's not, and so it's really bad. We fast forward, I have a master's degree from a top French school, quantitative approaches for hedge funds and analysis. I've worked for the world's largest hedge fund. And I'm where did I put my cheap prop? Ivy League author for Columbia University. This book, The Nature of Value, deals with understanding the economy as an evolving system, an evolutionary process, and how does one invest in companies or allocate to capital. So all of the analogies, and this isn't a stupid evolutionary, survival of the fittest, kill or be killed type thing. It's a deeper understanding of how things adapt and innovate and keep going forward. I teach, I guest lecture at Columbia University, Ivy League school, in the value investing program, which is the same course that Warren Buffett took years ago. I occasionally show up. The offer I always make to the students is, if you buy the book and you do not like it, I will give you $2 back, because that's all I get. And I can tell you that after 4 years of writing this book, I make about 5 to 6 cents an hour for the efforts put in. So don't go into academic publishing, that's a free lesson. But it is a fascinating meditation on economics and value. So a little about me. On the technical side, geek at heart. I studied cultural anthropology to understand complex systems and people and culture. I focused on sustainable economic development in West Africa, and also art history because that was fun. And on the tech side, I had a startup in university way back in the days when I had hair. I have been chief analyst for a Deep Future Research Institute modeled in the MIT Media Lab. My role there was to oversee the commercialization of 70 PhD projects, a couple of fields of artificial intelligence, materials sciences, life sciences, etc. I'm a geek at heart, and I really love to understand things from first principles, the most basic elements, and then see how they emerge. So that's kind of me. Also, in terms of this presentation, if you have questions, ask. Some speakers are uncomfortable, they don't like to be challenged. I like that. I teach in a classroom, so if there's something that doesn't make sense or you think I'm just wrong, bring it up. We'll have a better conversation, and you'll, this is for you, so you'll learn more stuff out of it, and I will too. So here's our first presentation. So SolarCoin, for those of you who don't know, it is a renewable energy currency that's given away for free. In crypto land, it's not very popular. It's like number 400 in coin market cap. There's no ICO. It's extremely unsexy. I'm very happy and proud about that because we're not interested in appealing to speculators. We have a very different mission. The mission is to incentivize solar energy globally for the next 40 years. When you think 40 years out in crypto, 4 weeks is a long time in crypto, right? For the base, some new thing, there'll be a new directed acyclic graph. There'll be a new thing next week. So we give this thing out. We give a token out for anyone who produces a megawatt hour of energy. That's it. You give us a little bit of data, you get your SolarCoin token. The first question a lot of people ask once they get that it's like Bitcoin is, okay, that's cool. Where does the value come from? Who's financing this? And it's the same question we could ask of Bitcoin. Now, a lot of people have the flawed assumption that mining creates value, which is the exact opposite. Miners are chasing value, right? They're chasing a reward. The easy analogy to make is if I hid a single gold coin worth 1,000 euros in your backyard. Economically, you should be willing to spend roughly 999 euros to dig that coin up in terms of effort, and then you get your reward. It really doesn't increase the value of that gold. You're just chasing a reward. And that's really what mining is. And most of you probably get that. It doesn't add value to the network. And even from a security perspective, as Vitalik Buterin put it very eloquently, Bitcoin probably has the world's most expensive 7 of 10 security mechanism. What I mean is an M of N. What I mean by that is the mining now is so concentrated that effectively, there are 10 nodes effectively represent the bulk of the miners. If 7 of them, et cetera, collude, you have the 51 attack, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Here's the question that I posed. This is the rehashed version, but it was the start of the thesis. Where does value for money come? So I want to first date this slide. I delivered this lecture at the Museum of American Finance, April 18, 2017. Again, in crypto land, that's forever ago. For regular people, it's about a year. And I posed this question, which was meant to be provocative at that time. Bitcoin, $10 or 10,000, right? Now you hear 10,000, you think, okay, maybe by next Tuesday. Or we'll get back there again because that was, November, etc. So, and the flip side is $10. Who knew? At the time, to put it in perspective, the currency was trading at about $500. So this statement was, could this thing increase by a factor of 20? Okay, to put that in perspective now, it'd be the equivalent of saying, I think Bitcoin could go to $120,000. So the theory is this. Where does Bitcoin get its value from? And if you're on the internet and you're in the space, you'll hear a bunch of opinions from ultra-libertarian Americans and other people, economists, etc. I'm here to tell you the real secret of economics is there is no theory for the value of currency in economics. There's a very bad one that involves the velocity of money. Nobody really measures it. If you really poke and prod it, it falls over. There's lots of theories in economics or traditional economics about the relative value of a currency. If this is €1 and tomorrow all of a sudden there are twice as many euros produced or in existence, I'll be able to get half of this for €1. It's a relative value. Variations on that theme involve interest rate parity differentials, economic growth projections, et cetera, but there's no core theory of, okay, where did the value come from? Why can I get this for €1? What's underneath there? So I'm going to present a theory for economic value. Came from the States. This is my book, and before we get in, I just want to explain some fundamental economic basic concepts. Warren Buffett's fundamental economic thesis is there are two things when we talk about, let's say, a stock or a currency. We could say there's price and value. Value is what it's really worth. This company spins off cash flow, has assets, etc. Price is nothing more than opinions about it. Now, Warren Buffett, as an investor, his whole premise is he waits for these opinions to become very, very wrong. So if the opinions push the price of something way, way over here, but he believes it's worth twice as much, he buys it, and he waits eventually for reality to catch up. That's all he does. It sounds easy. Obviously, it's a little bit tougher than that, but that's it. Now, nature of currency value, I came up with a model, and I said, well, first of all, let's ignore all the economics that's traditionally wants to be physics and formulas, and then you look at the formula, there's always an asterisk with a bunch of crazy assumptions, perfect information, logical actors, et cetera, deeply flawed. We're dealing with real people. So I worked out and I said, well, let's look at what we call utilities in economics, or utility function. And we say a currency has, my thesis, 3 utility functions. And I'll lay out the formula in a second. A redemption utility. This is a relic for most currencies. The redemption utility is, can I go back to the guy or the woman who made this thing, or the central bank, and they'll give me something for it as the issuer. I can redeem it for a thing. That used to be gold. That feature of most currencies or protocols was lost in 1971 or around Bretton Woods. The second utility is speculative utility. And that's just a bunch of people buying and thinking, oh, it's going to go up, it's going to go down, it's whatever. I consider it fairly uninteresting, speculative utility, because it's technically almost unpredictable. It's going to be random. And if you have a currency, if you issue your own token, you really don't want to attract speculative utility. A lot of people think they do, but what that ends up doing is a lot of people buy into your token, the price goes up, everybody feels good for a while, and then the speculators move on to the next token, it falls down, etc. All you've done is induced a lot of volatility in your currency. You haven't changed the value component. So SolarCoin has one of the most boring websites out there. We are aspirational in trying to market as well as the Federal Reserve does, right? Not known for their campaigns, folks, or their flashy graphics. We're interested in building the third utility you see here, which is network utility. This is the number of people who believe in or agree to use what we call a protocol or a currency. And I'll get to that in a second. So, first of all, networks aren't things. You probably see these diagrams, everything's all connected, right? Well, from a real network perspective, that's a bullshit diagram. Because effectively, it's a post-priori state where it's like, I'm from the beginning of time of this network, I know all the nodes and all the connections, they're all hyper-connected. A network is actually, if you really want to think about it, for those of you who know what a fractal is or a fractal dimension spatially, a network is a temporal fractal. At any given point, at any given point in time, some of these nodes will be connected at a given state. This specific representation is an end state and overstates the actual way the network works. Closer to here, we have activation. I'll get to why that's important in a while. So I think of currencies as having two functions or two aspects to them. There's a medium and a protocol. And I'll explain why that's interesting. The medium is however that currency is expressed. You guys are all technology or close enough to technology, you get a protocol. TCP/IP, a fax protocol, a dial-up modem protocol. All a protocol does is it's a convention between two parties on how to share something, communication, interaction. The medium is, in most of these protocols, electronic. The medium here is paper. The medium could be gold. There have been, throughout history, there have been forms of currency that have been expressed as shells. The protocol was one shell, one unit. This protocol of $1 could be expressed in metal, electronic, could be on a blockchain, could be on the SWIFT network. I'll explain why that's interesting in a second. We use protocols socially so that we can do things better, faster. Here's a protocol. There's no physical law that says when you come to that sign you need to stop, but we've all agreed that that's a convention that actually allows us to drive faster and safer. It's a very interesting concept. And this is a meta protocol. They can all be, as a protocol, they can all be abstracted to information. Right? All they are is representation of information. This is a statement. If you are here, exhibit this behavior, and then go forward. Behavioral program. So, I'm bad with book recommendations. I like to make lots of them. Great book, if you haven't read it, do. One of the real basic concepts in there is this, space, which I found simple and profound, for the best ones. Subjective, intersubjective, objective. The subjective is how I feel. You can't prove it, disprove it, you can't, these are internal feelings. The objective is physics. Economics wants to be here. They're aspirational physicists who couldn't make the cut, so they went to economics, made some assumptions. They're getting better in micro, where they have the behavioral economics, so I'll give them credit there. But really, economics is a social phenomenon. It's an emergent phenomenon with all of us acting together, trying to optimize our own values, which in aggregate end up leading to increases in GDP and development economics. So what in the middle is really cool is the intersubjective. It's what we use to optimize this value. It's culture, it's currency, it's our norms of behavior, it's the stop sign earlier, it's our legal agreements, it's the fact that I show up at the door there and don't immediately push everyone else through and be a rude person. We have these protocols and behaviors. These emerge to allow us to do things better, safer. If you live in an environment with a good legal regime, you can get a mortgage for a house. I mentioned earlier, I studied development economics. There are many cultures where if there's no legal system, or if you're in the bush and there's no extra legal system, you will not see a lot of mortgages and things because there's no protection for the protocol or enforcement around a behavior set. So the intersubjective is a very powerful concept. Now, why is it important? Here's a toy economy. I like, again, first principles, so we look at little basic pieces and then see how they aggregate up and emerge into interesting phenomena. Here's our toy economy. One guy, he's a fisher. One woman, she grows wheat. Someone else is an egg layer, or has a chicken, I guess. Big distinction there. And the other one, has a cow they milk. Now, this actually looks like a bond. We have a coupon every day, and then at some point, you get the full interest back. You kill the cow and have to stay. The fish happens aperiodically, etc. What happens is, if we have a toy network with 4 nodes on it, each person is a node on that network. They're trying to optimize their own value. That basically says, hey, I'd like to have a little something for dinner. I'm getting sick of fish. How do they trade among themselves? Now, resolving the information elements between this is what's called a superordinate problem. A coordination problem is where you or I, 2 nodes, agree to some value state. We'll create an IOU. Hey, you caught a bunch of fish today. I'll get you some grain tomorrow. We're all good. We create IOUs. The problem is, as we grow the number of nodes, the relationships and the partial relationships, is 1 cow or a glass of milk worth 10,000 eggs or 1,000 eggs? The guy here doesn't know how much the fish. So what ends up happening, or our thesis is that an emergent protocol, a substitute medium of good, effectively becomes money. And in this instance, we're using, from history, cowrie shells that became an information placeholder for the goods. Oh, you owe me some cows. Well, what I'll do is I'll give you these shells because you know you can go get fish for them later. Okay. That's the thesis. This is, the protocol is a shell, and it's expressed in its physical medium, a shell. They're one and the same. The history of money is a separation of those things. You can see how you might have gone from, oh, well, we're going to, instead of shells, which are easy to find, or, all of a sudden someone's going to show up with shells from the next village, we'll have something that's rare enough that its relative supply is stable, but we all agree it has value. The most well-known thing is gold, right? For 5,000 years, gold is it. It's rare enough, it's commonly distributed, easy to break up, etc. So gold is, again, physically expressed as gold, and it has a protocol of gold. That sounds obvious, I'll get to why that's not in a moment. And it worked for a long time, so it's rare. Now when I put my anthropologist hat on, gold is stupid. Bunch of poor people dig stuff out of the ground, bunch of rich people put it back in the ground and bury it, and then you base an economy around that. That's kind of how it works. And I can explain why we chose gold by asking a couple of questions of the periodic table, but we'll skip that because this is a short version. So we have this protocol. And when you think about gold, a lot of the gold today isn't, the protocol is gold, but the medium is different. It might be paper, an ETF, could be a credit swap, an option, shares in a gold mining company. Yeah?
So you have there, the economy size is assets plus currency.
What? Yeah, oh, economy size, yeah. So the size of the economy, this is interesting, the size of this economy is, the protocol is sitting above it, right? You and I need to trade stuff with everything else. We have some, we start with a little IOU. And then IOU actually represents an asset. It's not a real asset, but it's an intended asset in the future. So one could argue that in this simple economy where there's no credit has emerged, no debt, we've only got currency and the real things, all the assets in that economy are effectively the real stuff here. And the information protocol is kind of suspended in state. It might be the expectation that I'll get a fish tomorrow. In the real world economy, that information protocol is fairly small. It's 1 to 4% of GDP in most countries. So the currency equivalent in most countries is 1 to 4% of GDP. That means that, let's say we had a Swiss economy, average GDP per person is $80,000. The average Swiss person, to organize their economy and trade, needs 1 to 4% of that that real world value in money to trade amongst themselves. The statistical outlier is Japan, very cash economy. 6% of the economy is cash there. Macroeconomists talk about money, and they talk about the types of money. Currency is at the bottom of a pyramid. It's the smallest part. It's called M0, or the M1 equivalent. Above that is called M2. These are called monetary aggregates, which are different forms of credit. Bank deposits. Up at the top is M3. These are the durations of credit, mortgages, government debt, etc. But at the very bottom is currency, so we'll understand currency first. Now the theory I'm giving you is a thesis for where does the $7.4 trillion in circulating currency get its value from. And that's something that economics doesn't have an answer for, so we're kind of proposing one. So the thinking is, well, the economic network's interesting. It's a belief system. So this person or this person may or may not believe in shells. Right? They might worry about shell hyperinflation or whatever. But if they do believe in shells and accept them, they're part of that network. The example I give often is if I were to go to Trafalgar Square, drop a $20 bill on the sidewalk, just a piece of paper, it'd get picked up quickly. And the reason is someone would recognize it, it's a $20 bill, they recognize the protocol, and they'd say, oh, cool, I'll pick that up. They may never have been to the US, they may never have held a dollar, but they recognize it has some value. They're part of the network. Now the US dollar is probably one of the strongest, most popular protocols in the world right now. My estimate is probably 1.5 to 2 billion people. You can probably show up with a $20 bill and get something reasonable out of that. Protocols, economic protocols, you're all from technology land, emerge and they die. The average life of a currency protocol is 27 years. Okay, the euro's 18 years old, roughly, 22, 23, depending on when you say it emerged. Depending on your country, the longest of the protocols, the British pound, 327 years old. The US dollar, which has had a couple of versions, it had a bug fix or a feature fix in 1971, where they took the gold option away, depending on how you view that. Many developing countries, currencies die, right? They all die the same way, hyperinflation. The hyperinflation in the currency caused by typically a credit bubble, government overspending, leads to a lack of faith in that currency. The current, poster child for that, or example, is Venezuela. Estimates are 15 to 50,000% inflation. Every day you wake up, you're very aware that your money has lost its value. Now, what happens in that type of environment? You're like, wow, we've got a crappy protocol here. I've got this protocol in my wallet. It's terrible. I could get 10 eggs, yesterday. Tomorrow, I'm looking at 5. This thing's fading fast. So what do? You try to choose another protocol. You want one that's stable. Well, when you're thinking in that protocol, and you've all traveled abroad, and when you travel abroad, you get very good at multiplication or division, right? It's X number of pesos per euro. It's, this many dirhams, you name it. Same thing happens. The person goes, okay, they're living in their own mental state of, this is the protocol I know, the Venezuelan bolivar. Everything else looks like it goes up. Bitcoin is going up, the dollar, the euro, all of it's going up. In reality, it's stable, but your perception is it's going up. Now, that's interesting because it's a potential demand for these virtual currencies, right? People in Venezuela want Bitcoin. Here's the network math, and this is the fun stuff. Some of these figures have been updated, so you're seeing the old version of the paper with only a couple of currencies. We've updated this with 100 currencies, my co-author, Paul Johnson. And we found a real interesting thing. We have the subjective thing, roughly subjective. I believe in this stuff. How many nodes are there for the US dollar? Bitcoin at the time, the only reasonable estimate I could find from the Cambridge report, and as you know, it's tough, right? You can't just measure wallets, you can't just measure transactions. Who believes in Bitcoin? This was back in May, before March of last year, before all of your friends and uncles started asking you, you're the Bitcoin, should I buy, right? And they all said that in December, you said, and then they did, and now they don't want to talk to you about it. It's awkward, you just hold on, it'll work out. But then they panic. Anyway, I've seen a lot of trading in my day, so it's a standard cycle. So here we have the different number of nodes, estimated. This is the M0, or in Bitcoin land, the market cap, equivalent for these currencies. It's Korean won. And this is SolarCoin, which back then we estimated, a crude estimate, had 1,500 nodes, people who may or believe in it. A hobby toy project. Tiny market cap, $4 million. Here's the fun part that pops out. These nodes, value of network nodes, are roughly the same. If I'm an economic actor, let's say I make 50,000 euros a year in my job, I need a certain amount of currency as information, literally this protocol in my head, to trade and optimize and do things. How much does every single node need? Well, we see this here. If you take these figures and you adjust for the GDP, you normalize them for GDP, they converge more, which supports the thesis. If I'm in rural India, or where I spent time in Niger, Africa, where they had a $500 per capita GDP, I don't need $1,000 per node per year in protocol. If I'm in Switzerland, I might. So when we normalize these to dollars for the GDP, i.e. the economic function we're solving for, just to optimize for trade, these things converge. Now the cool story about this is an emergent property. This is why this paper will be delivered in a complexity form in MIT. This is an emergent property of individual actors optimizing their subjective utility to improve their economic life. And this emerges. Now in economics, this is what's called a positive economic externality. For those of you familiar with solar and carbon and all the evil things, negative economic externalities are things where a person engages in a behavior and others suffer. Could be as benign as loud music, or dumping cyanide into a river, or putting carbon out there. Positive economic externalities are really interesting because the more people who play the game, we all win. Language is a case in point. If we all have a shared language, we can communicate, we can share ideas, we can organize, we can do profound things. Standards, most protocols, innovations, inventions, vaccines. Right? If 80% of us get vaccinated, the other 20% may get that benefit because the disease won't come to us. So positive economic externality is extremely rare. I recognized one in currency, so decided to apply it to something that I thought a culture or country could never have too much of. The list I came up with was education, healthcare, and energy. No one ever accuses a country or a group of people and say, those guys over there are way too educated. Oh, they got too much healthcare over there. Or heavy on the energy, they could lighten up a little. I chose energy because it's easy to measure, easy to reward. So what I did with SolarCoin, I launched it and I said, okay, here's the deal. I consider myself, in my little Twitter handle or whatever, I call myself a recreational central banker. Nobody's paying me for it, so it's a hobby. And one of the problems you have as a recreational central banker is how do you issue your currency? How do you get people to join in? You can't just say, oh, I'll make 1 billion tokens and I'll give them to all my friends or all my family. And then everyone's like, yeah, that's your family's currency. We're really not into that right now. So what we did was we said, look, currency or a protocol is a belief system. We will state the rules of this belief system's game, circulation. So the inflationary effect is a function of proven, verifiable solar energy. We did a giant pre-mine. Everybody in crypto land ignored it or hated it. Those are the two choices. Very few said, oh, that's great. We put the pre-mine in public wallets and said, these are reserve wallets. We made an estimate of the amount of solar energy to be produced for the next 40 years. That's what we're trying to incentivize. The thinking being that you want a big enough, ambitious goal that people are like, okay, yeah, that's amazing, and it's bigger than any individual. But you want it small enough so that it's reasonable, right? If you don't fix climate change in 200 years, it's probably not a big deal. So we made an estimate. We know it's wrong. We hope it's useful. All these tokens are sitting in reserve wallets, blah, 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 cold storage. Every time someone shows up with data for us and says, I generated this much energy, and we can verify it, and we do some KYC on the people, we're getting better at that, we issued them a token with a little message that says, facility 123, it's anonymous, generated this much energy from this period, and we boot up our economy. So we're booting up a small economy with SolarCoin. When this was done, it was 1,500 people. The SolarCoin economy is still tiny. We know hype speculation. It's probably 6,000 to 7,000 people. I announced yesterday at InterSolar that we are partnering with a company called SMA. They're a German inverter manufacturer. They have a solar energy monitoring platform. So they take data in from solar energy inverters and aggregate it. They have the world's largest monitoring platform. They monitor 5% of all the global solar energy produced. And so we will take data in from them, just a couple of data points, 2 or 3 per year. And if the people who are on that platform want, they'll get SolarCoin. Our goal then is to go from 5% of the global population, we're working on the other 95. That's where we're working. Right now, tiny project, everyone ignores it. We're totally good at that. We're building network value. We assume the price will take care of itself as it emerges.
That's a good question.
Of course.
What's the value? Why would somebody like to have and own a solar farm?
For the same reason someone may want to own a Bitcoin, right? There's effectively no inherent value underneath it. It's like any currency. Earlier I mentioned the 3 utility forms of currency, right? The euro has no redemption feature, right? I show up with a 20 euro note at the European Central Bank. They'll give me 2 tens and a pat on the head. That's all that'll happen. Bitcoin, you can't go to anyone and say, oh, I've got a Bitcoin. Give me, it's a collective emergent phenomenon. The same with SolarCoin. The only difference, slightly different from SolarCoin, is there is a narrative and a story behind why it got issued into circulation. If you like solar energy or you think the network thesis is going to work, you buy in and you speculate. Like I said, we don't encourage speculation. Personally, when people ask me, they say, how many, gosh, I want to buy this. I've had professional investors, VCs, others, I want to buy these things. I say, no, that's not the deal. Go generate a bunch of solar energy and show back up, or go to an exchange where we don't sell them. When friends ask me how many should I buy, I say, how much would you be willing to spend on a night out for drinks? Okay, go give that a shot. That's your gamble. Anything can happen in crypto. So the summary of this story, I'll just get right to the conscious. When Bitcoin was at 500, instead of focusing on the price, the real question should have been about the value. The value is a function of the network. The third utility is a speculative utility. We just ignore that. It goes way, way high, probably in December, above the size of the network. Yes, sir, you have a question?
So if someone is solar coin, so Bitcoin I can give it to someone else and I can transact. So
Yeah.
for solar coin I'm making some coins because it generated some. What do you do with that?
You can do whatever you want with it. There are exchanges. You can exchange it directly into fiat. Our economy is booting up with a few what I call SolarCoin off-takers. So there's a PR firm. SMA is actually looking at offering services. so that people who are on the platform, now they haven't said which services yet, can actually just go and spend their tokens right away. Right now, we'll throw the merchant tools in, so that if you're a merchant, the same way if you're familiar with payment gateways and Bitcoin, any merchant will be able to say, hey, I accept these things, and then they'll swap right out to fiat on the one side. They won't have the exposure, but they'll be able to signal they accept it. I can explain that in detail. So the net theory of this was, the question to ask was, how big is the Bitcoin network going to be? And if you thought, oh, there was going to be a extreme forkage, a disaster, and only 60,000 people left in the network, and we know the circulation, right? It's roughly 18 million, but I mean, it'll go to 21, but that's 100 years out. You have a price prediction of $10 per Bitcoin, right? If you think that there would be 60 million, and this is the figure we were using back then you could justify a $10,000 price point. Again, you're thinking about the future value of a network of participants. That was the theory. And so that was the final argument there is, don't talk about price, right? 99% of all the articles in CoinDesk and all the rest are some silly chart, some dude usually, who has an opinion about price, right? And all the journalists do is they pick the extremes, because that's clickbait. So one guy's, oh, it's going to zero, and then other people can write hey, Bitcoin died for the 50,000 time article, and then the other guy says it's going to be 200,000, right? And then the journalist writes that article, because that's more clickbait. Why did this guy say that, and who was he? But the real question is, what's the fundamental value? And that's the network question. So I apply this to SolarCoin. That was another project. So the other thing that I can share with you, well, let me go to the formula behind this and how it actually works. Can you believe this slide was just made up 10 minutes ago? Formula's been around for quite a while. How do you value a currency? That's the question. I'll be writing a book called Network Capitalism. It'll be out in 5 or 6 years. Set by your calendars. Network Capitalism, P equals the max of R or N plus S. The easiest way to think about this, ignore Bitcoin and all that garbage. Let's think about an old US dollar. It's 1970, the year I was born, right? It's kind of a year of bad drugs and worse music. And we had a gold redemption with that coin. You could take your physical dollar and you'd go get gold for it. It was a redemption feature from the issuer. So if you were the issuer, you had a choice, a maximization function. You could either go to your local central bank and say, I'd like my 1 ounce of gold, because that's super interesting. Or this thing allowed you to have access to a network of goods and services in America or the rest of the world. And hey, I got a $20 bill. I'll go buy the chicken sandwich instead of the 1 gram of gold, or whatever that is. The speculative utility can be higher or lower, right, depending on the mood of the market or the opinions about the value of the currency. Now, something a lot of people don't. Yeah.
How is that different though? I mean, isn't that just arbitrary? They're not the same?
I'm not trying to understand the question. This is the fundamental theory for network capitalism. Almost any asset has a degree of moneyness as a concept. Could be the fish we mentioned earlier. The way you redeem a fish, you cook it or you trade it. What's the fish market like today? Same thing with the cowrie shells. This is any form of currency. It's the most primitive formula that you can use to price it. And you can actually use this for any asset. And this is the token engineering concept. One of the things that a lot of people screw up in token engineering is they pile crap on. Oh, it's going to do this, and boy, it'll solve math problems, and it'll make you better looking, and and it's going to be worth this, and it'll do an ICO. Very flawed thinking. You'll see a lot of broken token models, and here's why. People are doing this subjective. They're maximizing their own utility. They don't care about your token design, right? Once you release the token, it's out there. So what happens first with the ICO? Well, I'm coming up with some cool utility. The best case is storage tokens, right? It's a very simple use case. Storage. I'll get we'll call it it could be SIA, file J coin. You guys probably know some of these. I'll get a terabyte of storage for a month for this coin. That's my redemption feature. I do a big ICO with a bunch of hype and crap, and everyone buys in because it's the next big thing. And so there's some network utility, number of people participating, and then some huge S. The ICO happens, and then all of a sudden I have to really deliver my storage utility. Price is going to converge the max of those two functions. people either will keep speculating and it'll be a cool currency, then they'll never use the storage function, because why would you? Right? Why would you go storage if you could go buy beer with the thing? It's worth more to you. Conversely, if everyone loses faith in the thing, and it's, it's like, oh, the ICO hype, the magic is gone from the word blockchain, but I could really use the storage because it's cheaper than Amazon S3. Okay, then I'll go to the redemption function. Now, something that people do when they want to make cool tokens, like, oh, we'll have it do another thing or have another feature, right? Simplicity is the key here. If I come up with more redemption functions, right? Oh, you can buy computational power or storage or et cetera, all of your cool, brilliant designs won't matter, because the people who have the coin will serve the maximum R, if you have 3 or 4 Rs here, or it'll be N plus S, speculators. SolarCoin works purely as money, has a 0 R, like most fiats. Yeah?
Could you do the same explanation, but with basic attention token? Maybe
Yeah.
know about it from Mozilla.
Yeah, anything falls in here. When I say anything, almost, it could be, one example, you guys probably don't remember, in the 80s there was a concept in America, kind of little Beanie Babies. Right? And the Beanie Baby was a speculative thing. People bought Beanie Babies because other people bought Beanie Babies. Nobody wanted to play with them. They're boring stuffed animals, right? Beanie Babies were these little stuffed animal things. Some of them traded for hundreds of dollars. We fast forward 20 years, this disappeared, and now you have somewhere 20 cents. Used eBay market for Beanie Babies. Anything can have a degree of moneyness based on the network acceptance or its utility function. If lots of people agree a thing is money, money.
And so for the basic attention token, the redemption
Is potentially the value of that attention relative to another advertising network, right? So if you're worth Google, let's say you spend 50 hours a year with Google, they're good at monetizing it, that's worth $100. If the basic attention function can do the same thing, and let's say you're as a single user with a token, you'd be roughly worth the same R. Same thing with the utility storage tokens. Right. So here's a good story about storage tokens, because they're a really easy use case. There are a bunch of them, and you can look. There's a great article on Medium about it. Storage tokens are a classic case of this gone wild. I think it's SIA. A lot of somebody's been burned, or they've watched from the sidelines and laughed. SIA tokens, like FileJ and StoreJ or whatever coin, huge one of these. Everybody piled in, etc. They have something like 24 petabytes of storage or something. The user factors, you very rarely hear people who are building these platforms talk about those people, i.e. users and utility, because there aren't a lot of them right now. Like Gnosis, pick your token. How many people are really users? They'll talk market cap, they'll talk price. The users for SIA, I think, was you trade, you measure economic purchasing power parity against different currencies to see if they're strong or weak relative to a basket of goods in a country. So if I buy this token and it holds its purchasing power parity, that's perfect money. That effectively is the promise of gold, that I'll have my purchasing power parity for whatever holding period I'm looking at, 10 years, 20 years. Now the false narrative is gold isn't like this. Gold is actually slightly like this over the long, long term, because it costs 1% to 2% a year to store gold. It's a true actual cost factor. Most currencies have this curve. Now the correct way to draw this curve for the average currency is to have it go out 27 years, looks something like this, and then crashes. The average currency disappears in 27 years, loses its value. The average developing world currency, most central banks target a 2% inflation rate. So you're actually on a low gradient. Now the interesting thing about currencies, most of us don't think about holding it forever. Most of us are like, oh, I'm going to buy my lunch or whatever. So the holding period we actually have when we did some estimates, for most currencies, we're mentally thinking, okay, what can I do with this for the next 3.5 to 4 weeks based on median purchases? At a 3 to 4 week horizon for the currency, the drop in purchasing power parity is de minimis, right? If you get a €5 note and you think you can buy a dozen eggs with it, most likely you're thinking, yeah, in 3 weeks I'll be able to buy another dozen eggs. It's imperceptible almost, the decline, but it is roughly 2% a year. That's how we read this specific diagram. Now the dashed, or the solid lines are for the redemption function. So here's an individual agent with a constant PPP. This is their perception. Here's the reality. This is what most of the gold bugs sell. Oh, it's going to be like this. Well, the reality is you hold gold for 30 years, you'll probably take a 30 to 50% haircut for the storage and all the rest. But don't tell the gold bugs that. Now, what's the network utility? Well, it has uncertainty to it. It has a large degree of uncertainty because you don't know how big the network is going to be. You don't know if you're going to be able to buy anything. So we show that as a wavy line. It's an amplitude, and I call that fidelity. It's a concept called fidelity. What is the truthiness or the value of my future? I don't know, but over time, the network may change. Political, central bank activity, country goes to war, you name it. And so for a very short duration, I don't notice it. But network access, the goods and services I can buy from other believers in a protocol, is an uncertain thing, and typically a declining one. Now, the interesting thing is, if I'm choosing protocols, I choose the one that will be maximum utility for me, which is going to work more than anyone else. This might be the wavy line, more declining for the Venezuelan bolivar, losing value. If I can choose between two protocols, and I can choose the dollar, and I know that it's still wavy, but it's a little less, I'm going to choose the less risky asset over time. Protocol dominance. If the protocols are equivalent, they'll be switchable. Where does this count in Bitcoin landia? Well, the Bitcoin forks. For the average user for money function, there may not be many differences between BTC and Bcash, however we want to label that, right? You have your Bitcoin maximalist and all this. To the average person trying to buy a pack of cigarettes, they don't really care, as long as they're stable currencies. So they're functionally nearly equivalent, which means they're going to take a little bit of market share for each other, which is probably the real reason that the Bitcoin people get upset, because it's one thing to fork the code, it's another thing to fork the network of users, which is going to eat away a little bit of their addressable share. This is an example of a non-currency with increasing uncertainty over time.
What is a non-currency?
Oh, a non-currency could be, anything can have a degree of moneyness. Really interesting example is art. Really interesting example. I buy an Andy Warhol print, just a little small print. Let's say it's a lithograph. It's $1,000. What's it going to be worth in the future? I don't know, right? I don't know from the network of other people who buy Andy Warhols what it's going to be worth. It has high volatility. However, if I have something that is readily tradable as a collectible thing, maybe it's a coin, commemorative coin, it's the Meghan Markle, Princess Markle, whatever coin from the UK. It'll have some, let's say, traded volatility. You buy them on eBay. It may serve as a bit of money if it were declared a currency, but it has high volatility. Anything can become money, and what I mean by that is when the typical protocol fails, other things become money. Great case in point, we're here in Germany. Weimar Germany, when the Reichsmark blew up, what became money? And we can see this in other countries as they collapse. Whiskey was a great form of money. Standardized unit, stable. You could redeem it if you really had a bad day, drink it. Or you could trade it. So it became money. Anything can become money. In prisons in the US, they trade something called a mac, which is a box of mackerel fish, and it roughly approximates $1. So they have the physical constraint of not having access to dollars, but they still need an information protocol, right? Somebody needs to trade something for cigarettes, and they use the mac.
So the redemption value really has to be separate from the network.
Yeah, the redemption value.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I want to have this.
yeah, the redemption value is primarily if you know you're going to be able to get something out of it, and the redemption value is drawn as a straight line because it's high degree of certainty. Can I go to the central bank? Can I eat the fish? Now, the redemption value of a fish, interesting, let's say this is, it's a week. I don't have refrigeration. The redemption value of a fish kind of goes like that. Right? It's not going to taste too good on Friday if you caught it on Sunday without the refrigeration. However, maybe I could also draw the trading value of the fish if there's a fish-based currency there. What happens with the collective? Well, collective behaviors, the individuals, all aggregate to a single line for currency. So this is just trying to draw out from the base primitives the individual. Longer holding period, the collective equals this. This would be the volatility of any currency or protocol. Yeah?
So about the max, does that mean that different max have different redemption values?
No, this is the cool thing. The max are all the same. That's what helps make it money because it's a physical protocol and a medium. Okay. So, and in the prison, there's an article in the Wall Street Journal about this, right? So this isn't me pulling from anthropology.
No, yeah.
And they wrote about the max. And one guy said, hey, you're going to eat that. And the prisoner said, no, that's a trading mac. The thing was like 10 years old or whatever. And he's like, no, that's money. You don't eat that. But it still functioned as currency. So it's irredeemable, but it still held this placeholder as currency. Other constrained social environments that use information protocols, casinos, right? So the protocol might be $1 or €1, but they have these little chips, and they do that for psychological reasons as much as for safety and security, because you can't spend it outside of the casino. Yep.
So, my mind has been blowing.
Do we need beer?
Not yet,
I saw this brewery over there. It was awesome.
So, I'm with you, redemption, and all of that. The question, the actually really interesting question, which is bugging me and us, obviously, right? We are with you in redemption, completely.
We can all be redeemed.
Yeah, we
Have faith.
my personal view, not being as deep into economics like you, is simply when economy starts, it's not complex, right? And when it starts, you have this redemption value. Always, you have this redemption function, right? People use anything to exchange goods and services because they trust in this exchangeable thing to have a certain value for all.
Yeah, one of the earliest forms of currency was Sumerian tablets that were claims on grain, right? And so the redemption values you could get grain. So it was very close to a physical redemption.
So would you agree that it's complexity that then kind of makes it irredeemable?
Yeah, what we've done with the diagrams is you can show 5 of these little diagrams and show the history of money. So you went from an intermediate consumable good, like say wheat, to something as abstract as Bitcoin, which doesn't exist, doesn't have a physical medium, it's nearly a protocol, and doesn't even have the issuer, technically. Ignore Satoshi and whatever. And so the history of money has been a constant abstraction and separation of the medium from the protocol.
Because of complexity.
It's actually not. Because the answer we say is we consider currency where things have moneyness in varying dimensions. And those dimensions, in a mathematical term, could be a physical attribute, could be a supply-demand attribute, who's creating it. So the physical attribute, if I give you the choice of 2 protocols, fish or gold, well, you probably will, if all people have the same choice in the network, most people will go for the gold. Because they know the fish has a finite life. It has a higher dimension of durability. So we list out roughly 10 dimensions for currency: divisibility, life expectancy, variance in supply and demand. So are diamonds too rare or too volatile in terms of supply function? They can't be broken up easily. They're tough to measure. Even the guys who grow the gold bugs, right? Go try and buy a pack of cigarettes with an ounce of gold anywhere, or 2 grains, and get someone else to believe in it. So when we look at these different dimensions, what you see is you can simulate, we're looking at partnering with someone for the MIT paper, you can simulate collective behavior of agents boot the network with a heterogeneous distribution of different currency protocols, and then give the agents the opportunity every time they trade it to go for the optimum one. And they're going to optimize for the currency protocol, which probably has the longest durability, lightest portability. So if you have the chance of carrying 60 pounds of salt around, or half an ounce of gold, pretty soon you'll get sick of the salt. You'll go for the gold. And so you could actually simulate a network and show how the most favorable dimensions in the aggregate for the network emerge as the most popular protocol. Because every time you go to trade, you go to the market, you don't know who's going to be there, you want to increase your likelihood of a functional trade. And so you're going to take the most money thing that's most likely to be accepted by the other nodes. So it's actually a network optimization function for the preferred protocol based on the dimensions of the thing. Okay, that's a lot. It's getting hot in here. I'll keep flying through this. This is a collective way to measure a network. How well does a currency work? So it's accessibility to a network. So this is an example before the internet, after the internet. Network potentials. Here's a redemption value curve. This is the US dollar in 1971, where there was obviously some N plus S, and then all of a sudden, 1971, Nixon took you off the gold standard. You lost your redemption. The reason people were pissed, they couldn't articulate it, but they lost an option. They lost the gold option. It had an intrinsic value, and it was just taken away with a pen. Now they argued it was backed by gold or whatever. Well, there was never enough gold to cover the money. Even gold trading today, 90% of all the gold traded, ETFs, bank deposits, notes, is paper. If everybody shows up and they say, like my gold, please, there'll be some disputes. A few, right?
But why doesn't the price adjust? So maybe, so why? So somehow the economy grows faster than this first redemption value function, which is fixed. So why doesn't it somehow just keep a relation to it, or is it because of?
Here are a couple interesting things about economics. One, the value of the economy is constantly evolving and changing, and that's primarily, let's assume population is fixed, population per capita. That's innovation. We innovate and constantly find new ways of creating value more efficiently, measured by energy, etc. It's in the book. Get 2 copies. You all have friends. So you constantly, if you issued a standard currency like Bitcoin, and let's say there were no other protocols, it would be deflationary, roughly 2 to 3% a year, because we're getting better at creating value at that rate. Central banks print more currency, roughly at the rates created deflationary currency, or inflationary currency. So they're printing more than is actually producing the value of the economy. One of the reasons they do that is because if a currency had an increasing redemption value all the time, why would you spend it? Right? And so this is, again, we think from the subjective perspective. Man, if I think this thing is going up, if I think the speculative value of my SIA coin is going to go to the moon, well, I'm not going to use it for storage. I've got one choice, right? I'm going to maximize my return. If I think this redemption value is going down significantly, I'll dump it onto the network, assuming that's a higher function. Now, if the network value is decreasing faster than the token, utility token value, you'll go buy your storage with it immediately. So there's one maximal function that's chosen for a token. So if you're designing a token, think about that. Now, the tricky part is the ICO. You launch the ICO, boot up this big network with beautiful flashy graphics and a PowerPoint that may or may not become a product at some point in the future. It's all unicorns and rainbows. It's lovely. I've been there. I've shipped software. I know how it works. And we did actually ship. Some of the features were there. So the challenge, obviously, is what's the real redemption of what you bought? Platform. I've talked to some guys who, they wanted to. Their story for the ICO was they were going to build, Facebook on the blockchain, whatever the hell that means, right? Your lolcats are better if they're immutable. I don't know. Raised a bunch of money, and the problem is they raised a bunch of money. If all the people really think it's going to be cool, they won't go onto the platform. Why spend your tokens to get on the platform? Think it's going to go up. Of course, it's self-fulfilling prophecy. There's a paradox where nobody's ever on the platform. R is low. At some point, everyone kind of wakes up, and it's a little bit like when the cartoon characters run off the cliff, and then they look down and fall. It's somewhat like that. It's really not going to be pretty for those things. So think about the value you're actually trying to create in a token, and then realize that at some point there's going to be an inflection point when that token will go to that R value, or maybe people just want to use it for money. There is no R, which is a SolarCoin thesis. I could get into more of the, this is a way of looking at networks. So the concept is if an individual, these are the economic networks, and the little small note here is the number of counterparties take. And the argument is, well, this is the dimension of the expected holding period and the addressable market. I have a choice. I'm a trader. I have a choice of which money or protocol I want to use. Ooh, I'll probably go gold. If the network, if I'm going to have the largest number of highest fidelity, most likely off-takers who take gold for whatever thing I'm selling, and it's going to last longest on the dimension of durability, that's what I go with. So an economy is, we're talking about, the booting up the complexity economy. It may have started at fish very easily, and then also be like, oh, barley lasts a pretty long time. Some guys are like, oh, beaver pelts, they last forever. Barley after 2 years rots, but beaver pelt can wear around, it's very fashionable. And then, oh, salt, it's great. Now salt has crap dimensions in terms of density, portability, and other things, but if durability is what you care about, there. So we can look at the dimensions of a currency. Now here's the last one I'll leave you with. It's a fun one. It's the Eisenhower dollar. And this is an example of a complicated utility token, right? It's got 4 utility functions. It's, there used to be an old joke in the 70s, if you guys know Saturday Night Live, about this product that was both a dessert topping and a floor wax. You can use it for both. A lot of utility tokens will like it. Look it up on YouTube. It's pretty funny. Dan Aykroyd is good. So here's what an Eisenhower dollar looks like. This is a really interesting, we call these a Gojo diagrams. I'm Gogerty, my co-author's Johnson. We're not very clever or creative, so we just, did that. So the Gojo diagram is the following. This is what I've been showing you earlier. Here's an Eisenhower silver dollar. This is the speculative network on eBay, and they pay roughly today, we looked up the numbers, $15 for an Eisenhower dollar. The melt value, if I sell it for silver, let's say it's an ounce, is 13 bucks. If I go and I go buy my cigarettes, smoke anymore, but let's say I do, I get $1 worth of cigarettes, right? And these are my speculative values. Now I did a piece of research actually to see what the metallic value of gold is, because a lot of people are like, oh, gold is this amazing thing. If you look at it from the electronics market, who's really using gold for what? Assuming it was cost-free, we wanted to assess its economic value, it's roughly approximate to silver. So gold is roughly, from an electronics perspective, assuming it had no money function, which we've all chosen, it would be worth roughly $10 on the electronic market from a functional utility perspective. And that has to do with the conductance and the impedance and the melt point and all that. Now here's the thing that's really interesting about this chart. If you're walking around on the street and you find this thing, your starting point is here, your transaction. Found an Eisenhower dollar. What are you going to do with it? Probably not here, here, or here. You're going to go up there, dump it, or hold on to it thinking that maybe it's going to go up in value. If someone gave it to you in a cash register, like, okay, I got $1 worth of change or whatever, most likely you're going to go up here. Now, when we think about networks and network protocols, 3 or 2 of these things don't exist. There's no Eisenhower melt value, and there are no Eisenhower dollars in circulation, or they're extremely rare. This is the economist joke about walking down the sidewalk and finding the $20 bill, right? The 2 economists look at each other, one says, oh, a $20 bill. The other economist says, no, it's a perfect rational world, it can't exist, right? This is kind of this argument. There are none of these in circulation because they've all been lifted up into this network function. Your utility coins will do the same. Highest value from the subjective user. Yeah?
But actually the silver, that it's melted silver is not the redemption. Isn't that a network node as well? Because it's as much silver as it is a dollar.
Yeah, well there's a network function out there that's traded silver, and so we can put a little volatility function with it. But if I'm the trader, I can look at that and say, okay, assume that it's, it may not be, let's say, a fixed value, but you're trading for the market. It's probably lower than the speculative utility of the volatility.
No, but there are nodes of in terms
oh yeah, no,
of
yeah. There's a network for silver.
So
exactly.
Here is silver in the shape of a coin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So actually, that would be an N as well.
It would be an N with a potential. It could be an N with a potential S as well, unless your local smelter said we'll always give you the spot price. Yeah. And again, these should really never show up. And so they all end up here. Some of them obviously were here, they died or whatever. So from a network utility perspective, the challenge is, you raise capital up here with your ICO, you decide, hey, we don't need to be regulated because we'll call it a utility thing. Network launches, wasn't quite the product we all dreamed and hoped for, and it's got an N over here. Somebody's going to show up with a lawyer and a lawsuit and be angry. Sorry, that's the way it works. We can also use an interesting, I'm going to discuss credit's a whole other story, but I will say this about credit. Money has a dimension, it's inverted pyramid. Currency's at the bottom, lowest protocol emerges from the network effect. On top of that, when we start believing in a form of money, we start lending in it. And that's credit. Credit emerges from the faith in a currency. There's a reason none of you have a Bitcoin mortgage, because you don't know whether your payment is going to be 10x higher or 100x lower in 10 years. So the current yield curve for Bitcoin is about 10 to 15 days, and that's what you can lend to an exchange. It's worth about 15 to 20 basis points. The paradox of Bitcoin is as its volatility declines, as the network of speculators disappears, and the people who are actually using it emerges, and as that network stabilizes and the volatility declines, it will actually mature as a form of money. A mature protocol is one where credit emerges out of it. Someone says, yeah, I'll loan you 1,000 Bitcoin for a year and you give me back 1,000 Bitcoin. We're all good with that because the volatility or the fidelity of the currency is declining to enough of a point where I'm willing to take that risk on the future value of it. So Bitcoin isn't a mature form of money yet, but that's the paradox of its growth. So how big the final network is, where it stabilizes, who the heck knows? This is credit in its own right, and this is a really interesting thing. Credit actually decays into currency. It's got a decay function, and we call that the interest on credit. And the interesting thing is, the hedge fund I worked for figured this out in 2008, 2009. Everyone thought the US dollar was going to collapse and go down because it killed the interest rates. The exact opposite happened. 99 out of 100 people and analysts didn't see it. The reason is they knew that most credit in circulation is actually rollover credit. So if the government issues $10 billion or 10 billion euros worth of notes next week, 9.5 of those billion may have been from notes that had come due and they were going to have to pay the principal back, so they reissued them as new notes. What happened during the credit crunch in 2008 and 9 was there were all these, let's say, mortgages or notes based on mortgages and other forms of credit, they came due. The problem was nobody showed up to buy the new ones. When that happened, there was a huge demand for dollars because principal was owed. And so the dollar actually went up significantly because the credit decay function pulled it up. Hey, we need our interest rates. Or pay me back all my principal. Instead of a normal, hey, I'll just roll the thing over, the principal came back. And so the dollar actually rose because so much of the global debt was denominated in dollars. I'll leave it there. That's a whole lot of stuff. Who's next?
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
So I think Sam is now totally intimidated. No.
Well, I'm shaky because my brain is like in overload.
Well, it's a lot. You guys now
because we're thinking about this, right? We're thinking about exactly these issues, and